Welcome and thank you for joining today's conference, Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Please note that all audio connections will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. Please open your chat panel by using the associated icon located at the bottom of your screen. If you need technical assistance, please send the chat and address the event services host. With that, I'll turn the call over to Kari Cohen, Project Branch Chief. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Marvin, and good afternoon to everybody. This is Kari Cohen here with my video on briefly, coming at you live from a basement in Washington, D.C. So good to have so many of you on with us today. We are nearing 300 participants in today's call, which is really great to see such interest in the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or as we call it here, RCPP. This is our webinar for potential applicants. We did put out the 2 funding announcements for RCPP here in fiscal year 2022. We put them out last Thursday, and excited to share some information about those funding announcements with you today. As Marvin said, I am the project's branch chief, so it's my team here at national headquarters for Nrcs that has responsibility over RCPP. Of course, a lot of the action for RCPP happens at the state level, and we'll talk about that today. But certainly excited to be here. I'm going to be presenting part of the presentation today, and then Russell Ames, who is on my staff here in DC, will also be presenting part of the slide deck. Why don't we just jump right in and get started? Our goal here, of course, is to get through our slides and then leave some time for questions. There'll be an opportunity at the very end to ask verbal questions, and of course, throughout the presentation today, you can go into the chat and enter your questions, and we'll try to get to just as many as we can at the end. What we always do afterward, we always try to put together a frequently asked questions document that we post to the RCPP website and send out to all of the webinar participants. So look for that in the weeks to come after the webinar. So with that, Marvin, why don't we just move to the next slide, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video. All right. Let me just change my view so that I can see everything here. Okay. So this is just to highlight the goals and objectives of today's webinar. Certainly, we want to get through sort of the 101 of RCPP, just to help everyone get oriented. We're going to highlight the differences between the 2 funding announcements that we put out. We put them out simultaneously this year for the first time. Want to make sure everyone understands the differences between the classic program and the alternative funding arrangements program. We'll get into some of the details in the funding announcements, although certainly not all the details. We'll outline what an RCPP project looks like, what sort of conservation activities happen in an RCPP project, and how the financial approach to RCPP may inform your proposals. And then we'll talk about how your proposals will be evaluated by NRCS staff. So why don't we jump into 101? Marvin, next slide, please. All right, so in a nutshell, RCPP is a partnership between NRCS and a lead partner, which is, the lead partner is often supported by other partners, but the relationship is often really directly between NRCS and a lead partner, and we're co-investing in targeted, innovative natural resource solutions. That's our sort of tagline. Next slide, please. The basics of the program, many of you will know this, that it was first authorized in the 2014 Farm Bill, reauthorized with lots of changes in the 2018 Farm Bill. And as I mentioned, it really promotes coordination of conservation activities out in the landscape with partners that are bringing value-added contributions to these projects that expand our collective ability to address on-farm, watershed, and regional natural resource concerns. So why would a partner such as those on this webinar apply to RCPP? Well, it's really pretty basic. Partners can get some funding through RCPP, but it's generally pretty limited. And so really what partners get is the opportunity to influence where NRCS spends its money. You can help influence where geographically NRCS spends its resources, to what types of producers and landowners, and for what purpose. Is it for water quality, wildlife habitat, air quality, soil health, on and on. So it really is to the benefit of partners that are out there working on the landscape already, who have an idea, that want NRCS resources to come in and complement what they're doing. Next slide, please. These are the principles of Rcpp that we have talked about since the 2018 Farm Bill has been implemented. First of all, we're looking for projects that have an impact out on the landscape, that are looking to solve natural resource challenges in a given geographic area. We're looking for partners that can bring partner contributions, as I said, that are value added and really amplify the impact that we can collectively have. We're looking for innovation, which is often in the eye of the beholder, and in the context of an Rcpp project can take many forms. The partnership itself can be innovative, the way that you're trying to target the funding within a geographic area, the actual activities that are happening on the landscape, the way that you're combining activities. There's lots of opportunity for innovation within Rcpp. And finally, what does your partnership look like, and how are you planning to manage your Rcpp project? We know from experience that the lead partner, who the lead partner is and what their capacity and capability is really critical. Some of these projects, our maximum project, as we'll talk about, is $10 million. That's a good chunk of change to spend in 5 years. We want to be able to work with partners that have the ability to manage these complex partnerships out on the landscape. Next slide, please. All right, a quick overview of our funding announcements. It's really important to understand that we did put out 2 funding announcements. They're separate, and that's because they work in different ways, even though they have some similarities, as I'll get into. But the key point is that we have a total of $225 million maximum available combined for these 2 competitions this year, which, if you look back at fiscal year 21, where we were able to combine 2 fiscal years worth of money, we spent almost, we announced awards that total almost $400 million in FY21. So you can see that we have substantially less funding available in FY22. It's going to be quite competitive. Just want to make folks aware of that. It's not $225 million for each of the funding announcements. It's in total. Whether you're applying for Classic or AFA, the project maximum of $10 million and the minimum of $250,000 is the same. And all proposals, whether you're applying for Classic or AFA, they're all due by midnight Eastern on April 13th. So folks have 90 days to pull these proposals together. And as always, the proposals are submitted through the Rcpp, or what we're now calling the programs portal. And lots of folks may have experience with that. But if you don't, you're going to want to get started early and get in there and tool around and get familiar with the portal. Just want to make sure folks understand that even though we posted these on grants.gov, we do not accept proposals through grants.gov. All right, next slide, please. All right, you may have noticed in this year's funding announcements that we highlighted 3 priorities of this administration that will influence how we spend money on Rcpp this year. The 3 priorities are climate smart agriculture, urban agriculture, and racial justice and equity. I will just point out, as the funding announcement does, that we intend to spend a significant amount of the funding available this year on projects that address one or more of these priorities. So it would really behoove all partners that are applying to pay attention to that section of the funding announcement. Next slide, please. All right, something else we highlight in the funding announcement that kind of ties into the racial justice and equity element in some ways are projects that benefit historically underserved producers. You know, USDA has this definition of historically underserved, or HU, producers and it encompasses beginning farmers and ranchers, veteran farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and limited resource producers. And again, we have it in the funding announcement that we intend to award a significant amount of available funding to projects that meaningfully benefit HU producers. This isn't really any different than prior years, but we are putting a new emphasis on this. In fact, we added a new question to the proposal in the portal that is asking for the partnership's experience in working with HU producers. And when you submit your proposals, every proposal will receive an HU index rating, which is described there in the funding announcements. So just want to make sure folks are taking a look at that and trying to think about how they can meaningfully include the participation of historically underserved producers in their projects. All right, move to the next slide, Marvin. I'll take a quick sip of water. So the Rsvp program, since the 2018 Farm Bill passed, really has come in 3 flavors. We're going to talk today about Rsvp Classic, which is the traditional program we've been running since the 2014 Farm Bill. We've got Rsvp alternative funding arrangements, which is really intended for more progressive conservation approaches that work in a slightly different way than, or a meaningfully different way than the Rsvp Classic program. We also have an Rsvp renewals component that allows for the streamlined renewal of existing projects, but that opportunity is already closed for FY22, and we'll be announcing the renewals opportunity for existing and eligible lead partners later this year, probably in a May to June timeframe. So we won't be talking at all about renewals today. Next slide, please. All right, let's get into a little bit about Classic and AFA and what the differences are. This is a very simplified schematic that sort of tries to capture some critical pieces of Classic versus AFA. If you look on the left side of the screen there in Classic, it's really more of an even partnership between Nrcs, the lead partner, and really representing the full partnership, and producers. And we'll get into this a little bit more detail. In alternative funding arrangement projects, Nrcs's relationship is really with the lead partner, and the lead partner is the one who is taking it on their shoulders or on its shoulders to interface and provide technical assistance and financial assistance to the participating landowners and producers in a project. It's a very important distinction, and folks really want to be careful about which component they're applying to. Folks can apply to both at the same time, but I will just note that because they are distinct in the way that they work, you don't want to submit the exact same proposal in both components. It wouldn't make sense to do that. So, and hopefully that's clear as you read through the funding announcements. Next slide, please. Let's start with some similarities for AFA and Classic. For both, the funding must be split 50-50 between the critical conservation areas and state multi-state pools. We'll describe this a little bit more in a little bit, but basically half of our money has to be spent in the critical conservation areas and half in these state multi-state pools. The state multi-state is really, basically can encompass any project, small or large, that's happening in a single state or across states, while the CCAs must be within those critical conservation area boundaries. The maps for that you can find in the funding announcements. All of them must target conservation, or should really lead to conservation benefits and target resource concerns. Both components require that there be significant partner contributions as a part of these projects. And our goal, as always, is to have the partner contributions at least match the Nrcs investment. As I mentioned, the funding minimum and maximum is the same for both components. The split between financial assistance and technical assistance is the same for both components. Again, the majority of funding that's going out through Rsvp from Nrcs really is meant to go to producers and landowners and communities for conservation on the ground. That's the FA or financial assistance part of it. And then the eligible lead partners are the same, as you will see in a little bit. So those are some of the similarities. why don't we dive into some of the differences and talk about why you might apply to one versus the other. Next slide, please. So the classic or traditional program, you would choose that if you want Nrcs to be the entity that's contracting directly with producers, landowners, and local sponsors to get conservation on the ground. We do that through contracts with producers, easements with landowners, watershed agreements with local sponsors. And again, these are Nrcs contracts that we are doing with these folks. You can also choose classic if you want Nrcs to be the entity that provides the technical assistance to get that conservation on the ground. There is also the option in classic for partners to perform some of those TA activities. But generally speaking, if you want Nrcs to do the TA, that would be under classic. Even though Nrcs is doing the contracting and maybe doing the technical assistance, you would apply to classic again if you want to influence the project geography, where we're spending the money, what sort of activities we're doing, whether it's easements or land management or rental contracts or watershed agreements. The resource concerns, again, is it water quality, is it soil health, etc. What types of land use are we working on? And also how we rank producers that are going to apply to your Rsvp project. You can have influence in all those different ways. Next slide, please. On the other hand, if you're an entity that has the capacity and ability to enter into contracts directly with producers and landowners without using, again, Nrcs contracting vehicles, then the AFA component might be for you. We don't just turn around and give you $8 million, for example. You're going to enter into a partnership agreement with Nrcs. We're going to enter into a supplemental agreement where we'll have to hash out exactly how you're going to contract with those producers and landowners. But by and large, the lead partner and the partnership is out there working directly with producers and landowners, and you have the ability to secure the participation of landowners and producers and not rely on folks that are walking in, for example, to Nrcs offices. And you also have the capability and capacity to provide the technical assistance that's necessary to get conservation on the ground. We say in the funding announcement for AFA that we definitely prioritize projects where the partnership can provide all of the technical assistance with producers and landowners. Next slide, please. It's important to understand, and my team was joking around earlier today, even though we post these funding announcements on grants.gov and it talks about grant opportunities, Rsvp is not a grant program in general, and the AFA component does not provide grants to entities. That's just not the relationship through which we implement these projects. Every bit of funding that goes out to a producer or landowner has to, follow a lot of the same rules and regulations that our classic projects do. And the Rsvp statute does not exempt our AFA funding from producers having to be in compliance with the highly erodible lands and wetland conservation requirements of the Farm Bill. They have to be eligible for USDA payments. They have to be in compliance with the adjusted gross income requirements of the Farm Bill. And there are really critical to understand NEPA, National Historic Preservation Act, and Endangered Species Act requirements. All of these things require AFA lead partners to work closely with Nrcs. It's not just a situation, again, where we turn over the keys and the funding to a lead partner and they go to it. AFA activities also must be consistent with covered program authorities. The covered programs are listed in the Rsvp statute. We talk about them in the funding announcements. There are things like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and the Conservation Stewardship Program and our easement programs. Those are the authorities that we have to operate under for Rsvp. So AFA activities have to do land management activities or easements or rentals, just like we do in Classic. And then for AFA funding, of course, we must have a credible and auditable payment process. We have to ensure that the funding is going out for the things that lead partners intended to go to. So it's just want to be clear that it's not a grant program. We don't just hand over the funding to our lead partners. Next slide, please. I do want to talk a little bit more about AFA and NEPA because it is so important to understand. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, very important for NRCS. Everything that we do out with a landowner, we have to make sure that NEPA is addressed. And for land management projects and rental projects, and even some watershed projects, under the AFA approach, if the lead partner intends to use our conservation practice standards, we've got 170 plus practice standards, all the way from cover crops to manure management, storage facilities, and fencing, and all the things that we do out there on the landscape with landowners. If folks are going to do things to our conservation practice standards, it allows for a very streamlined NEPA approach. If you're going to deviate from those practice standards, things can get complicated pretty quickly. And you may even need to, develop an environmental analysis or environmental impact statement, because again, we can rely on the categorical exclusions for NEPA that NRCS has with its conservation practice standards if folks are going to use those standards. So really important to understand, if you're out there doing all the technical assistance with the producers, you have to be able to do it to NRCS standards, or we're going to have to talk in much more detail about NEPA. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I think I'm going to pause here and drink some water, turn it over to Russell, who's going to walk through the next bunch of slides, and then I'll come back in at the end. Russell?
Thank you, Karin. So as you can see from this map, there are 8 critical conservation areas for which you can apply if you choose to apply for that funding pool. Each of these critical conservation areas has a priority resource concern or priority resource concerns that must be included in your proposal. Those are found on the website. So for example, if you are submitting a proposal that will fall under the critical conservation area funding pool for the Chesapeake Bay watershed, those resource concerns are water quality degradation and habitat protection. So your proposal would have to include either of those as a resource concern, and that would flow down into the producer contracts, supplemental agreements, and easement. And they would have to include at least one of those as a resource concern being addressed by those contracts. Next slide, please. The other funding pool is the state multi-state, which can be a single state, or it can be as many states as you can reasonably manage within a single project. So priority consideration will be given to those projects that have a reasonable number. Each year we make both small and large awards. There are some that are a portion of a state and some that are multiple states. The key part is requesting an amount of funding that will be useful given the project size, and also the lead partner having experience to manage a program, grant, or award of that size. Next slide, please. So partner eligibility is actually defined in statute. This specific list can be found in the rule and in the NFOs, so I won't read this to you, but if you have any questions of whether or not you fit into one of these categories, please reach out to your Rsvp state coordinator for the lead state based on where the project will occur. Next slide, please. So while the lead partner has to fall into one of those categories listed in statute, contributing partners do not. A contributing partner is any individual or entity that is providing a contribution but not serving as the lead partner. So you do not have to meet the eligibility definition in statute to be considered a contributing partner. You might be providing financial resources, you might be providing in-kind resources, but the contributions and roles of the contributing partner must be outlined in the proposal. As a reminder, the lead partner is responsible for the deliverability of all project contributions and for all deliverables assigned to a partner. And please note, so Rsvp funding that falls under a PPA through a supplemental agreement can only go to eligible partners as defined in that previous list. Next slide, please. So Rcpp funding must be spent on eligible land. So eligible land is private agricultural lands and non-industrial private forest lands. Those are defined a little bit in more detail in our statute. Public lands are possible only when consistent with the funding opportunity. So for example, Looking at a watershed structure built on public lands, but the benefits accrue to private lands or landowners surrounding that public works. Another example might be land that is a patchwork of public and private land, but is all controlled by a single private operator or landowner. So for AFAs, partners must ensure the producers have up-to-date files with the Farm Service Agency to be identified as having eligible land for an Rsvp project. Next slide, please. So in addition that the land must be eligible where the work is to be done, the producer or landowner must also be eligible for USDA payments. And so this is done by keeping on file in the Farm Service Agency system, which may include a CCC 902 form for entities, and there are separate forms for individuals. Producers and landowners must be in compliance with highly erodible land and wetland conservation provisions, and they must also comply with adjusted gross income provisions. So this might mean submitting paperwork to determine whether or not they exceed our adjusted gross income limit, and if they do, that might result in a reduction in the amount we can pay them absent a waiver. Next slide, please. So there are options to waive the adjusted gross income limitations in Rsvp. There are two. At the onset of your agreement negotiation, the lead partner will have the option of requesting an AGI applicability waiver for the entire project. This would waive the requirement to obtain a AGI determination, and it would also waive the limitation for the entire project. But if the lead partner does not do that, individual producers or landowners will still be able to make a request for a contract-specific limitation waiver, but those again will be done through the lead partner during the life of the project. Next slide, please. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but what happens in a project? We've divided up the financial assistance portion into 5 activity types that are similar to cover programs you may be familiar with if you have applied for or worked with Nrcs in the past. So the first is land management, then we have land rentals, US held easements, which is only available in Classic, entity held easements, and watershed public works, which we'll describe in greater detail on the next slide. Can you go ahead? Do you mind clicking and getting all 5 bullets? Thank you, Marvin. So land management activities are contracts with producers and landowners that are very similar to EQIP and CSP contracts. They're funding for conservation practices, enhancements, etc., and they follow standard Nrcs practices and planning processes. Why you would apply for Rsvp as opposed to encouraging farmers to go directly through EQIP or CSP is you can have a dedicated pot of money for specific resource concerns, specific ranking criteria, payment scenarios in your project area. And Nrcs can give priority to bundled applications. Check the NFO for additional details. There is a limitation for how much you can prioritize bundled applications, but you can give them additional points as part of the ranking process. Next slide, please. Can you click ahead to all 4 bullets, please, Marvin? So these are contracts between Nrcs and a producer. Landowners are generally excluded unless they are the operator of record. For Rsvp in particular, we expect these to be short-term targeted land rentals needs, not long-term rental. Application ranking and contracting will follow standard Nrcs processes, and we will use Nrcs developed land rental rates. Next slide, please. Thank you, Marvin. So for classic projects only, there's the option to include US held easements. The difference between easements and other programs is they are for any eligible land use that fits for Rsvp. They aren't tied to specific land use for specific deed restrictions, but the contract for these is between Nrcs and the landowner. The restriction-based templates come in 3 different flavors, from highly restrictive or most restrictive, moderately to least restrictive, and those do have some parallels in other easement programs. But if you want more detail on what is the difference between those different restrictions, We'll have an additional webinar on that later, but the templates can be found on the Rsvp website. The lead partner has the opportunity to influence some, but not all aspects of deed restrictions at the project level. Next slide, please. So for both Classic and AFA, you can include entity-held easements as a activity type. Again, similar to US held, they can be for any eligible land use type. And Classic funding will pay up to 50% of the easement value with the US right of enforcement, or up to 25% without. AFA funding cannot include a US right of enforcement, so we will only be able to pay up to 25% of the easement value. And for this, sorry, I misspoke earlier that the minimum detours for US held easements are on the website. Those will be available soon, but entity held easement minimum detours are on the national Rsvp website. Next slide, please. So there will be a webinar on Rsvp easements that will go into a lot greater detail about US held and entity held. That will be held on February 10th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll post that on the website, and we will be able to email an Outlook reminder to all folks that have called into today. Next slide, please.
And Russell, I'll just chime in here to say that Rsvp easements are unique. We've been able to develop quite a unique set of easement options for our applicants, but there's a lot of detail that as anyone who participates in easement programs knows, we just don't have time today in this overview to get into, but we do want to make those details available and have an opportunity for folks to get into the weeds on Rsvp easements. So we're going to set up that separate webinar and encourage folks that are interested in our easement component to participate. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you, Gary. So the fifth and final activity type for financial assistance is public works or watershed. These will largely be done through supplemental agreements between Nrcs and an eligible partner to implement watershed scale structural improvements. So planning and design may be a component of the project, but we're really going to prioritize shovel-ready projects. The Plan and Design Approval Authority is consistent with federal infrastructure projects and PL 566 model. So just be aware of that if you do want to propose an Rsp project that includes watershed activities. Your proposal should provide detail on the timing and milestones for planning, design, and implementation as appropriate. And please remember that Rsp projects are typically 5 years. So if you are including planning, make sure you've set realistic milestones that can be achieved within that 5-year time, or if you are proposing a longer period, explain why that would be a benefit to the Rsvp program. Next slide, please. So going back to why apply for Rsvp, that would be because if you are selected, the lead partner will be able to provide input on Rsvp activities in the project area. That includes the geographic area where we will spend Nrcs funding, what resource concerns funding will be reserved for. You can provide input on targeted land uses and activities. You can work with your Nrcs state and field offices to establish ranking questions, and you will be able to bundle applications, and priority can be given to those bundled applications. Next slide, please. Thank you, Marvin. So Rsp funding is similar in Classic and AFA, but we want to highlight some of the differences. The standard project, and when you submit a proposal, you won't be able to submit anything other than this 70-30 split, but you can negotiate differences if you are awarded. But in a standard Classic project, 70% of the project is reserved for financial assistance. Those are funds to do the activity on the ground, and another 30% is reserved for technical assistance, funds to support those activities. That technical assistance comes in 2 flavors: implementation TA, which is TA that supports those FA activities, and in Classic, that 23% defaults to Nrcs, but the partner can earn a portion of that, not to exceed 18%. But depending on the activity types, really that number is probably going to be lower in Classic. That 7% enhancement TA, think of that as project-wide, and it's something that'll be easier for the partners to earn. Next slide, please. In AFA, you see the same 70-30 split. We wanted to highlight here in the implementation TA, it's really expected that the partner will provide most of the implementation TA to support FA and AFA, and that's a key difference. Next slide, please, and we'll get into more detail on enhancement TA. So as I mentioned, these are for project level TA activities that the lead partner can be reimbursed for. They might include project management, outreach, communications, development and reporting of outcomes, development of innovative conservation approaches, or the environmental monitoring that you're expected to report on at the end of the project. Next slide, please. So that 7% is based on the total project cost, so that will include FA, TA, including the portion that is reserved for Nrcs that is required to support these activities. So for a $2 million project, the maximum amount of TAE you can earn is $140,000. But again, that depends on you providing deliverables that can be justified based on anticipated actual costs. So that is subject to negotiation during the agreement of what those funds could be used for, but think broadly project-wide activities. Next slide, please. So in that 23% that we said is reserved for implementation TA, a minimum of 5% will be given to Nrcs, but again, especially in Classic, that will typically be higher depending on the activity type, as there are some activities that Nrcs by statute and policy is unable to delegate, but that 5% is non-negotiable. That other remaining 18% will be negotiated, and depending on the activity type, the partner may be able to earn, if you are qualified and able to support financial assistance from Nrcs and are familiar with the Nrcs practice standard requirements and Nrcs planning process. TAI must be carried out according to Nrcs planning procedures and conservation practice standards and job approval authority, which will often lie with Nrcs. So that's why even if you do have qualified planners, there's still probably some of that 18%, even in land management, that will be used by Nrcs. Next slide, please. So I won't go over this in detail, but I would encourage you to read this. It's depending on the activity types. Land management is probably in Classic the best opportunity for partners to earn TA if you are familiar with Nrcs planning processes and standards. In rentals, there are limited opportunities for Nrcs reimbursed TA. In U.S. held easements, a lot of the TA and due diligence, which actually falls under FA, is carried out by Nrcs and cannot be delegated to partners for the most part. In entity held easements, we are consistent with other easement programs where the TAI support and due diligence activities are largely expected to be a partner contribution. And so if your project is entirely entity held easements, please set your expectations. There's not going to be a lot of TA or due diligence that will be reimbursed by Nrcs in your project. Finally, watershed is a bit unique and where we expect, even in Classic, the majority of TAI to be performed by the partner and reimbursed by Nrcs. Though we do hope that the partner will also provide some as a contribution. Next slide, please. So administrative costs. The 2018 Farm Bill statute is pretty clear and prohibits Nrcs from paying for administrative costs as part of the project. So administrative costs are those not directly related to implementation of the project, including but not limited to expenses for rent, utilities, durable equipment, software, copiers, phone, IT support. You can include a portion of your unrecovered administrative costs as part of your contributions, but there are very specific limitations on that based on either a NCRA or 10% de minimis, and that is based on a percentage of the TA provided by the partner as a contribution. But see the NFO for more details on that. And next slide, please. So our goal is for all Rsvp projects to have at least an equal set of contributions for every dollar that Nrcs is providing to the project. Obviously, if you can do greater than a 1-to-1 contribution ratio, that will help your proposal score even more highly in that part of the ranking criteria. But we don't just care about the overall number of contributions. We care that they're value added, substantive, elevating, and amplifying. So what do we mean by that? We mean we especially love seeing where some of the work will be funded for by the partner. So you might be providing additional funds to the producers that otherwise would not be able to participate. You might be using staff that are skilled in the NRCS planning process to provide TA that we are unable to because of staff limitations on the NRCS side. There's a wide variety. It could be cash, could be in-kind, but those are our goals. The key points are contributions must be expended during the life of the project and within the project's geographic boundary and in support of the project's goals and objectives. The only exception for that first one is you are allowed to count contributions as of the day of the award, as long as it gets included in your negotiated agreement. Next slide, please. So partner contributions, we do allow federal contributions to count as long as they are not from a USDA agency. So for example, Forest Service, not NRCS, but still part of USDA, so funds from Forest Service would not count. The portal application requires a justification to explain how you came up with your estimated contribution value. And for every non-lead partner that is providing contributions, the lead partner must upload a commitment letter explaining very clearly what that contributing partner will be providing for the proposal. Next slide, please, and I'll hand it back over to Kari to start back up with outcomes.
All right. Thank you so much, Russell. A lot of information in there. Again, just delving into the details, some of the details that are in the funding announcements. And before I move on, just want to remind folks that they can go ahead and submit questions in the chat. We've got a few in there already, but don't be shy because I think we've got about 10 slides left and we should have plenty of time for questions here at the end. So one of the responsibilities that lead partners have in both Classic and AFA is to report on the outcomes of their projects. And this slide just kind of explains what an environmental outcome is. Although for Rsvp, their lead partners also have the option of reporting on the economic and social outcomes of their projects. And for all of our active projects now, we actually have quite a few that are looking at one or more, either of those economic and social outcome elements. But basically, all the way on the left side of this slide, you'll see inputs where we're, between us and the partners, we're putting in funding and technical assistance. In the middle there, or over to the activities box, we're doing stuff on the ground with producers and landowners. And then that's creating outputs, right? The number of contracts that we have in a project, or the number of practices we put on the ground, or the acres that we have treated. And that historically has been what we've reported for Rsvp, for example, under the 2014 Farm Bill, and really for NRCS overall. But the 2018 Farm Bill changed that. If you look across the conservation title of the Farm Bill, you'll see this really new emphasis on environmental outcomes. And an outcome is kind of taking the outputs and going a little bit further and trying to understand what are the environmental, economic, and social benefits of the project. So how much cleaner is the water? How many more birds are out on the landscape? How did this impact a producer's, the financial element of their operation or in their community? And so we require all lead partners to come up with a plan to report on the outcomes of a project. Next slide, please. Let's just walk through this here. As I said, we've got to do this for every project. The economic and social outcome piece is optional, although we do see lots of partners taking advantage of that. We have, we're not just developing at this point, we've got developed a template-based approach that should work for the majority of projects. Basically, lead partners have several options, right? They can do environmental monitoring, they can do modeling, or maybe they can rely on the expertise of a local experts that works at a university nearby and really understands, the topic of the project. But there's got to be some sort of plan in your agreement. If you receive an award, you'll be signing an agreement with NRCS, and there's a component of that where the lead partner has to describe how they plan to develop these outcomes. So it's often the state RCPP coordinator that works with awardees to develop this plan, but sometimes NRCS headquarters staff here, my team, can get involved as well. But just want to note that every project has to have an outcomes plan. All right, next slide, please. The evaluation criteria that you see in the funding announcement, I am repeating this slide, which, these were the 4 principles of Rcpp. And I'm repeating it because these are the 4 overarching evaluation criteria that you see in the funding announcements. And it's true of both Classic and AFA. There's lots of sub-criteria under each of these 4 criteria. But these are the 4 things that you're going to be evaluated on, or your proposals will be evaluated on. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the process. For both AFA and Classic, all proposals will be evaluated at the state level. So it's really critical for Rcpp that your proposal is well understood by the state staff there in the state or states that you'll be working in, because it's really the states that have the evaluation responsibility, especially for Classic. Again, the reviews are based on those evaluation criteria. And we do have a national review team for the AFA competition that complements the state evaluations, but every Rsvp proposal is evaluated at the state level. State reviews and rankings are submitted to NRCS leadership, and in the case of the AFA component, they're combined and cross-tabulated with the national review team evaluations. And then, of course, the final selections are made by the NRCS chief in consultation with departmental officials. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about what happens after you get an award. This may be sort of getting the cart before the horse, but it's important for folks to understand how Rcpp works and what they're getting into should they receive an award. So let's say you apply and say, hey, we want $6 million to address soil health in the northwest corner of Michigan. Well, if we announce that, yes, we have tentatively awarded $6 million to entity X to do those things, they are tentative awards. They're subject to negotiation. What you all submit in a proposal is subject to change because sometimes there's information that we can't glean from a proposal that will come out through our negotiation. Basically, what happens is we get into a negotiation with the lead partner to hammer out the details of the project. And so the types of things that could potentially change are the overall project funding award, the details of how much will be spent on financial assistance versus technical assistance, the eligibility of partner contributions, and also how we're going to work together to implement the project. A few things that can't really change are the lead partner, the geographic area, and the resource concerns. Those are really critical things to whether a project is going to be selected or not. I talked about how important the lead partner is to an Rcpp project. And we always want to make sure that we have geographic diversity and resource concerns. So those sorts of things need to maintain, should be the same from the time the proposal is submitted all the way through project implementation. Next slide, please. The first thing that's going to happen after the negotiation is that a lead partner is going to sign what we call a partnership agreement that lays out, as I said, the details of the project and the relationship between the lead partner and NRCS. Does the lead partner, for example, want to bundle applications? Do they want to go out and find producers on an Rsvp Classic project and bring them to NRCS for ranking? That details like that will be in the partnership agreement. The partnership agreement doesn't actually obligate any funding. It just sort of lays out the relationship. This is how we're going to work together for the next 5 years. Any Rsvp partner funding, for example, that Enhancement Ta that Russell was talking about earlier, is subsequently obligated through what we call a supplemental agreement. It's really a contract that we negotiate with the lead partner or other partner. Again, the selection of a proposal really does not guarantee anything at the time of selection. We got to get into the details of what you plan to do under your proposal and make sure that everything is aligned with the Rcpp rule and all of our program policies. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this sort of lays out in broad strokes what an RCPP project looks like in Rsvp Classic. Again, we have this programmatic partnership agreement, or PPA as we call it, sitting over top. It's the umbrella for the that lays out, again, the 5-year timeline and activities that are going to happen in the project. Then we can enter into supplemental agreements with partners, for example, for technical assistance funding. We can enter into producer contracts, as we mentioned, for land management and rental activities or U.S. held easements. We can enter into entity held easement parcel contracts with landowners. And then there's Nrcs Ta as well. As Russell mentioned, we're keeping at least 5%, both in AFA and Classic, to manage your project and to do the NEPA and HEL wetlands and all that other work that we have to do. And so this is kind of what an Rsvp Classic structure looks like. The next slide, I believe, goes a little bit more into the AFA, where again, we have this overarching non-fund obligating agreement up top, but it's a little bit more straightforward, again, because what we're going to do is have a supplemental agreement with the lead partner, who in turn is going to go and contract with producers and landowners to get the activities on the ground. All right, next slide, please. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to apply. The very first thing you're going to want to do, as you know, once you get your idea and your partnership together, is reach out to your state RCPP coordinator or coordinators if you're going to be working in more than one state, and talk through your project proposal. They'll help you understand if it makes sense. They might be able to help you strengthen your proposal. And it's just really important, again, because these projects are implemented at the state level, it's really critical that you work through your state coordinators early and often as you're thinking about your project. We've got a partner's proposal guide on the Rsvp website. Encourage you to take a look at that as you start working through the portal. If you don't have what we call level 2 e-authentication permissions, you should apply for that early because it can take up to 2 weeks to process, and you need that to get into the portal. It's really important that you have that level 2 e-authentication. And then once you've got all that, your project and your proposal is all set, you would submit your proposal as we talked about through the programs portal. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline for here in FY22. As we said, the NFOs were released on January 13th, last Thursday, a week ago. The application period closes for both AFA and Classic on April 13th. Our plan is to announce the awards for both in August of this year. And soon after that, project negotiations will begin for those awardees. We always have an awardee orientation to get everybody level set on what's going to happen. And that will happen undoubtedly in September if we make awards as expected in August. We have in the funding announcement an estimated project start date of December 31st. Here we are almost a year from that date. It does take some time to get through all these proposals, make the selections, to get through some of those early negotiations. And this project start date is the date you would sign your partnership agreement, and it's fully executed. Obviously, December 31st is in the middle of the holidays, and of course is an estimate for any individual project. Some may take a little bit more, longer negotiations, and some will take less. But that's just a ballpark date for folks to work off of. All right, next slide, please. All right, I think we're just about done. Again, the list of state RCPP coordinators is current there on the National RCPP How to Apply site. Encourage folks to find their state coordinator or coordinators. We're also available here, the National RCPP staff. And there's our email inbox that is policed every day, rcpp@usda.gov. We welcome questions there as well. Okay, I think that's it. I think the next slide is just a pretty picture. So Marvin, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any verbal questions in the queue.
Okay, and as we move to Q&A, you can feel free to place yourself into the question queue by utilizing the raise hand feature located at the bottom right of your screen. If you are on a mobile device, you can tap your screen to display the toolbar, then press raise hand. You will be unmuted when it is your turn. Please accept the unmute message to become unmuted. If you are on the phone, please press #2 to enter the question queue. You can also feel free to leave your questions in the chat. Okay, we do have a couple of verbal questions here. I can go ahead and go to the first.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm afraid I didn't get into this session until literally just now. Is there going to be a recording available that I can listen to later?
Yes, we will have a recording posted on the web. It may take a week or two. We've got to make sure that it meets all the Section 508 accessibility requirements, that we have a transcript and closed captioned and all that stuff. So it will be available. Keep an eye on the Rsvp website. It should be on the How to Apply site or section of the Rsvp website. Just give us a week or two to get it up there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm currently seeing no additional verbal questions at this time.
Very good. All right, we have a bunch of questions here in the chat box. Keisha Harvey, my colleague here at our national headquarters, is going to read some of them, and I will try to field them. And if I can't, I will wrap in some other of my staff. So Keisha, go ahead.
Thank you, Kari. So our first question in the chat is related to AFA. In the Rsvp, AFA as the lead partner is the one that contracts with the producer. Is there more flexibility in what qualifies as a conservation practice, or would the partner still need to follow exactly what the Nrcs codes say?
Thank you, Keisha. And I will just reiterate that because of the National Environmental Policy Act, it's just going to be a lot easier and faster for our partners and our awardees to follow our conservation practice standards, for example, for land management activities, rental activities, and our watershed activities. If you want to deviate, again, from our practice standards, you're just going to have to think about building in some project time, building in some project funding for more extensive NEPA analysis. If the project follows our practice standards, we can take advantage of the categorical exclusions for NEPA that allow us to do a very streamlined NEPA process when we put activities on the ground. If the partnership is not following those practice standards or deviating from them in a meaningful way, you're just gonna have to build in some additional time and funding for more NEPA analysis. Even though these AFAs are partner-led projects in many ways, it's still federal funding, and we cannot get away from NEPA. All right, Keisha, next slide, please.
Okay, this question is in regards to Cca Areas. What about the western portion of North Carolina that is in the Mississippi River Basin, or does the Cca end at the TN/ which I think is Tennessee, North Carolina border?
Yeah, so thank you. Yep, thanks, Keisha. So we've had a few questions in the chat here I can see about critical conservation areas. The Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill, allows us once every 5 years to review the critical conservation areas and make any changes. And we actually did that just last year. We announced some changes to the CCAs in the summer of 2021. And so, folks are asking about why isn't one part of the country or another in a CCA. The CCAs are just set basically from last summer for the next 5 years. As to the particular maps of the CCAs and the boundaries, they don't necessarily follow the exact basins. For example, this question is asking about the Mississippi River Basin. The CCA map for the Mississippi River Basin is a little bit bespoke. It's not following the watershed delineation necessarily. And so the CCA does end there at the Tennessee-North Carolina border and does not go into North Carolina, even though the watershed itself might. All right, Keisha, next one.
Thank you, Kari. So we have another question about CCA areas, and this one is related to, is there a bonus/incentive to proposing projects that touch multiple CCAs?
That's a great question. If you're going to be proposing a project in the CCA funding pool, it's got to be carried out within the boundaries of a single CCA. So you shouldn't necessarily have a project that is trying to do something that spans, for example, the Great Lakes and the Chesapeake Bay. Now, you can do that in the state multi-state pool. It can be a state multi-state project, but it wouldn't make a good CCA project. So please note that as you're looking at these two funding pools. All right, Keisha.
Okay, this one is a question in regards to lead partners. Can the lead partner and producer be the same person?
That's a great question. There's, yeah. So you can have an entity, for example, that is participating in the project. We've seen that before where, the entity might be a landowner and is interested in having that, their land have a conservation easement on it. You're just going to want to talk it through carefully. There's conflict of interest concerns to be aware of. You're going to want to talk it through with your Rsvp coordinator. They can, touch base with us here at National Headquarters. If, you have definite parcels or lands that you want to include in your project and they are owned by the lead partner, you're definitely going to want to talk those through with us to make sure that we can address any conflict of interest concerns. All right, next slide, please. Or sorry, not next slide, next question.
This one is related to practices. Where do I find NRCS conservation practice standards?
Well, that's a great question. Whoever asked it, you can go to Google or Bing or your favorite search engine, type in NRCS conservation practice standards, and you will find the full list on the NRCS website of all 170 plus conservation practice standards. All right, next one, Keisha.
Okay, this one is another one related to CCA. Can you please advise on how to know whether to go for the state pool or CCA? Are there state priorities available to look at this?
All right, thank you for that question. We do not identify state priorities for Rsvp. Let's talk through this a little bit. Before last summer, the geographic constraints of the CCA pool were much more significant than they are today. The changes we made to the CCAs last summer means that almost every state is touched by a CCA. Of course, if you live in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and I feel like there's one or two other states that do not touch a CCA at all, that's not the case. So the main thing you're going to want to think about is what are the resource concerns, because the CCA projects have identified resource concerns and you have to be addressing one of those if it's a CCA project. So that might be limiting. Because of the prior geographic limitations on CCAs, the CCA funding pool was always less competitive than the state multi-state pool. But going through the last round of Rsvp, we saw that still a little bit, but it wasn't a whole lot less competitive than the state multi-state pool. So you really want to focus on what are your resource concerns that you want to address, and do you want your project to fully take place within a CCA? If you're going to address a CCA concern and you want to do it within the boundaries of a single CCA, I would recommend going into the CCA fund pool. All right, I hope I didn't butcher that too much. Keisha, next question.
Yes, this one deals with local support. So this question is to begin this is basically related to how do you begin do you contact your local NRCS field office to work through the proposal draft? So basically, where do you start when you want to begin? Do you work through your local NRCS office to start the proposal draft?
Thank you, Keisha. So obviously, our field offices far outnumber any other types of offices that NRCS has. But for the proposals, when you're developing a proposal and looking to bounce that off someone or make sure that folks are aware of what's going to be submitted, you're going to want to start at the state office. So every NRCS, in every state, NRCS has a state office, and you're going to want to work with the RCPP coordinator. Every state office has an identified RCPP coordinator, and that's the best place to start. Again, if you're looking at a multi-state project, you're going to want to touch base with all the coordinators in all the states that you're planning to work in to familiarize them with your project, make sure that what you're planning to do is feasible across the board. All right, next question, Keisha.
This one deals with outcomes. So a question is stated, I see that monitoring is a required outcome for explanation in a proposal, but I also see that research is explicitly not funded by RCPP. Your presentation just noted activities such as research and modeling as ways to document an environmental outcome. Can you explain this discrepancy / distinction, please?
Okay, so we do require the reporting of outcomes. And, you know, depending on how the lead partner plans to do it, it may require some quote unquote research, right? They may be doing monitoring, water quality monitoring, or bird population monitoring, or what have you. And we can fund activities that are supporting the generation and reporting of project outcomes. That's part of the Enhancement Ta that Russell was talking about. You know, if partners want research that's not related to the reporting of outcomes and to be a part of a project, they're welcome to fund it themselves. You know, the partnership can bring funding in the form of contributions to support such research, but we can support activities that, you know, help partners report on project outcomes. All right, Keisha, next question.
Okay, the next question deals with evaluation. If it's a multi-state proposal, does it get evaluated by each state?
Yes, in multi-state proposals, all the states that are part of the project will be evaluating the project. Yes, the answer is yes. All right, let's see what's next.
So this question deals with, will the webinar recording, is the webinar recorded for playback?
Yes, that may have been the gentleman who asked the verbal question. Again, we're going to put this up on the RCPP website. It'll take about 1 to 2 weeks to get it up there. So please be patient. And again, we're going to try to develop an FAQ document based on these questions and any that we don't get to, certainly, that will accompany the webinar playback. All right, Keisha.
This one deals with TA reimbursement. In order for TA to be reimbursed, do expenses need to be itemized by the Farm Service Agency's farm and tract number?
You know, I see this question and the next one about negotiating the terms of supplemental agreements. You know, they're starting to get into details of how we implement projects, and are probably more appropriate for like an orientation webinar. You know, I just feel like at this stage of the process, we don't need to get deep into the details of how supplemental agreements are negotiated and executed. So why don't we skip those in favor of some things that might help people develop their proposals, Keisha, if you don't mind.
Sure. Our next question deals with, can you show the timeline slide one more time?
Oh, that's a great question. Marvin, can you back us up? to the timeline slide. There you go. That one was easy. Keisha, I see a question here about technical service providers. Do you mind reading that one?
Yes, I'll read that one. Are Nrcs approved technical service providers allowed to provide engineering services under Rcpp?
So for folks that are not familiar, our technical service provider program certifies entities like an engineering firm or a certified crop advisor to provide services to producers. And if you're a certified TSP, it's a lot easier to work with Nrcs and to get reimbursed for doing technical assistance. The answer to that is absolutely yes. Certainly for AFA projects where the lead partner is on the hook for doing the technical assistance, they can subcontract with technical service providers. And even in Classic, we can negotiate with the lead partner to engage with technical service providers for things like engineering services as a part of our project. All right, next one, Keisha.
All right, so our next question deals with, is there mechanisms or platforms that I can use to explore meeting with prospective lead partners whom we can partner with? We are looking for partners interested in natural soil restoration, soil health. We are exploring opportunities in North Carolina.
We've we've contemplated trying to develop some sort of matchmaking process here, but it's really beyond the scope of what we can do. Who knows, though, whoever asked that question, there may be someone on the webinar today that may also be interested in soil health in North Carolina. Otherwise, you could take a look at folks who are working. There's all sorts of information about existing projects in Rsvp on our website. You can find folks who are doing soil health stuff in North Carolina right now and try to work through who those partners are. So sorry that we don't have a mechanism to do that matchmaking, but hopefully you can find some folks, some like-minded folks to help you submit a proposal.
This question relates to also on the lines of what you were talking about. It says, hello, thank you for all the wonderful information. Is there a history of funds for either of the two opportunities ever being used to purchase infrastructure / invest in building the capacity of community gardening projects?
That's not really consistent with the authorities of Rcpp. Purchasing infrastructure and investing in community gardening. We've got local foods programs under some of our sister agencies like the Agricultural Marketing Service. I encourage whoever asked that question to check out some of those other programs. It's not really something we can do through Rcpp. All right.
The next question, is there a list of climate smart agricultural practices? I think this is just a general question.
Well, that's a great question. I know that we've got a USDA list either in draft or it may even have been produced at this point. I'm not sure if it's a USDA or NRCS list. When you can try to Google right now, climate smart agriculture or climate change practices, NRCS, and see if you can get there. If it doesn't exist on the web right now, I'll make sure that we put something once we get the FAQ document together that can lead you. But a lot of the stuff is sort of obvious soil health activities, cover crops, no-till. But of course, there's all sorts of things that can help producers reduce emissions through reducing energy expenditures and things like that. So we'll just try to make sure that when we put the FAQ doc together, we get that list of practices in your hands. All right.
The next question is related to Rcpp timeline. If awards are made in August, but work begins December 31st, 2022, what's the earliest we can begin counting match funds?
Yeah, so the contributions, according to the statute of Rcpp, they can count as contributions for the project from the day that we make the award announcement. However, folks need to be a little bit careful. They should touch base with their state coordinator or coordinators because, just because you put a contribution in the proposal doesn't mean it's eligible. And that's part of the negotiation. So, you're just going to want to make sure that whatever contribution you intend to count from that date is eligible if you want to do it before the negotiation actually takes place. Really important question and answer. All right, next one, Keisha.
Yes, so can we use categorical exclusions from other agencies like NOAA?
The answer to that is no. Our categorical exclusions for NRCS conservation practices are very unique. A lot of the activities that would be carried out under Noaa authorities are quite distinct from what we do here at NRCS. If you've got some interesting idea that maybe you think I didn't quite hit on with my answer here, you might just ping us at rcpp@usda.gov and we can try to get into it with you. But I think you skipped, Keisha, over a question I saw here about spending on multi-state versus state allocations. I might just pick that one up. Do you see that one?
Okay. Yes, I do. It says, did you mention what proportion of the 225 million will be allocated to multi-state versus state allocations?
That's a great question. So we've got the state multi-state pool. That's a single pool. And we just have two fund pools, the CCA, the Critical Conservation Area pool, and the state multi-state. As I mentioned earlier, we have to spend half of our money on the CCA projects, half of our money on state multi-state. Whether it's in a single state or multi-state doesn't really matter. Although we certainly encourage folks to, if they have a multi-state project, to carry out their project in what we call a reasonable number of states. Once you get above 3 or 4 states, it can get quite unwieldy working with all those state coordinators, handling the finances across state lines. So you're just going to want to be careful about that. But I will say too that we have this combined $225 million, right, for these two competitions. We don't know yet how much we're going to spend in Classic versus AFA. We're just going to have to see what kind of proposals come in. I will say that we are limited to funding or awarding 15 maximum projects in the AFA competition. So that limits somewhat how much money we can spend for the AFA competition. But we do not have a set amount that we're going to spend right now for Classic versus AFA. All right, Keisha, let's see what we've got next.
The next question is, can lead partner staff time spent on conservation easements be counted as matched towards the federal funding?
This question gets into some of those details about easements that can get quite sticky. I encourage the questioner to read the NFO very carefully about what can count as match. It really depends on whether it's a U.S. held easement or an entity held easement. And if they're really interested in Rsvp easements, I encourage them to participate in the webinar that we're going to have on February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern strictly on Rsvp easements. So come on back and ask that question again if we don't answer your question in that webinar.
The next question, Lee, is AFA related. For AFA, can the lead partner pay a local partner who in turn makes contracts with eligible producers where both lead and local partners have credible and audible payment processes?
Yes, in the AFA, we've got, the only relationship really we have is with the lead partner. And so we're going to have agreements that we have with the lead partner, but the lead partner can turn around and provide sub-awards to other partners and folks who are working to do TA or even FA activities with producers and landowners.
Thank you. How much should applicants demonstrate or describe in regards to match partners in specific projects in their application? That's the next question.
Yeah, it depends on how one might read this question, and whoever asked it, if you want to ask it verbally, we might be able to go back and forth, but because it's kind of a general question. So it looks like Catherine Green, if you're out there, if you want to chime in verbally, we can try to hash out what you are trying to get at with your question. Marvin, is Catherine still with us? Do you know?
I can search for Catherine. Oh, it looks like Catherine has entered the queue. Let me go ahead and unmute here.
Perfect. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
So I'm just trying to get an idea of, because we're looking at a fairly large scope for our project, and I'm trying to get an idea of how much in our application, how much match we need to demonstrate that we have the partners that we're going to be working with and the projects that we're potentially looking at.
Gotcha. So you want to put as much detail as you possibly can, right? Often the projects that get funded or that we provide awards to are those that already have activities underway in the area or have a really good idea of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, whether it's an AFA project or working with Nrcs through a classic project. All of the funding that you're going to propose as partner contributions has to be committed at the time of proposal with those contribution letters from partners or non-lead partners, I should say. You should know specifically the types of activities that you want to carry out to address the resource concerns and conservation benefits. So, yeah, you want to put as much detail as you can within the question and character limits that we have there in the portal.
And the next question also is, Catherine, at what point during the pre-application process can applicants reach out and ask for comments and suggestions from coordinators on applications?
We say in the funding announcement to reach out as early as you can once you know what you're going to do and how it's going to be structured and the partners that you have. Talk to your state coordinator and make sure that they're aware of what you want to do and make sure it makes sense within the context of NRCS's operations in that state. It's really important to do it early and often, as we say. All right, we've got just a few more minutes here, Keisha. Let's see how many we can get through.
Okay, so the next one is for either Classic or AFA. Can NRCS funds be used to financially support a project coordinator for the lead partner organization?
So this goes back to what Russell was talking about, Enhancement Ta. So we allow partners to request in their proposal up to 7% of the total request as Enhancement Ta. And one of the things that folks can request to do under Enhancement Ta is to manage the project. We understand that it can be quite challenging, to herd the cats of, 10 or 12 partner organizations and all these activities and coordinate with NRCS. That Enhancement TA is designed to do that. Depending on how much you're requesting, it may be able to fund a project coordinator for the lead partner organization. Depends how much you're asking for and how much it's going to cost to bring someone on to do that. Again, folks should not be looking at Rsvp projects necessarily as capacity building for their organizations. Most of the money is going to go out on the ground for conservation activities. But if you're asking for a large enough project and that's what you want to spend your Enhancement TA on and it makes sense through the negotiation, then yes, folks can try to hire a project coordinator to manage the project. All right, Keisha.
Is there any value to securing letters of support for proposals from partners who will not be receiving any direct federal funding support from or contributing any matching support to the RCPP project?
Obviously the contribution letters are most critical to submit with your proposal. But, if you're planning to work in a geographic area and you want to submit letters of support from community leaders and, other organizations that aren't necessarily directly participating in the project, there's nothing to stop you from doing it. But we're going to be looking very carefully at those contribution letters. Yeah, folks can submit letters as they see fit. All right, Keisha, let's do one more question. Pick the best one. I'll leave it in your discretion and we will get one more in. And again, any other questions that we don't get to, we will try to stick them into the FAQ document that will be forthcoming. All right, Keisha, I was filibustering there so you could pick the best question. Go for it.
Here we go. Can you discuss how historically underserved communities are defined per Nrcs? What are Nrcs's goals for addressing the needs of HU communities with RCPP projects?
Well, questioner, I may have been speaking too quickly, or you may have jumped in a little bit late, but I did have a slide near the beginning of the presentation that talked about projects that benefit historically underserved producers and communities. So there's a definition for USDA of what historically underserved producers, what that term means. It includes veteran producers, beginning producers, socially disadvantaged producers, and limited resource producers. And as we say in the funding announcement, it is our intention to spend a significant amount of money on projects that benefit historically underserved producers. That is our goal. It is incumbent upon partners when they're submitting their proposal to be as explicit and clear on how they intend to include the participation of historically underserved producers if they are choosing to do so. We encourage folks to bring on partners that have experience in working with historically underserved producers. All that is sort of laid out in the funding announcement. We encourage you to read that section. It's a really important thing for the program and something we are emphasizing this year. So Keisha, I want to thank you very much for helping us wade through the chat box. Want to thank everyone again for participating. I think at our peak, we had almost 400 folks on the line today, which is really tremendous. Again, please work with your state coordinators as you develop your proposals. And we look forward to seeing what everyone is able to submit by midnight or 11:59 here in the East on April 13th. And again, if you're interested in our RCPP easements component of RCPP, come back and see us on February 10th. And we will send out the coordinates for that just as soon as we have them. All right, Marvin, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.